Welcome to the podcast, John, and thanks for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
No worries. Now, mate, you are the founder, CEO of Fancy Plants. Is it Fancy Plants Co. or just Fancy Plants?
Well, Fancy Plants is it's the business for the plant-based snacking company we have in Australia. It's a subsidiary of a parent company called Health Food Holdings, which also has the Chia Company under it as well.
Yeah, so you're probably better known as, for most people who know you, as the founder of the Chia Co. and bringing chia seed to Australia, but to the world in many cases.
Yeah.
But you're also a fourth generation farmer's son from the central wheat belt of Western Australia. So the question I want to ask before we get into the details of your business is, you grew up as this farmer's son. Were you, and you and I attended the same uni together, but were you always going to be a farmer or to be an ag? Was that always your ambition growing up?
Yeah, it's a good question. I always wanted to be in farming. So I went to school, came back on the farm, went to university, studied farm management, did a degree in agriculture, and then went back farming again. So I was, traditional farming, livestock, sheep and wheat. It's sort of an interesting stage. When I came back, wool market was really poor, grain markets had gone through a lot of turmoil. The ag industry was struggling a little bit. And what we used to be a very common conversation was who in the supply chain in food and agriculture is making money. So I applied I got awarded a Nuffield scholarship in 2000 and travelled in 2001. And my topic was looking at a lot of stuff in ag, sustainable supply chains, looking at impact of GM technology, most on the consumer end. I was looking at environmental branding. I was looking at the impact of how people farmed and how that was going to be affected in the future. And I was looking for the sort of mega trends in ag and food and how they were going to affect agriculture going forward. So it was a really fruitful period of time to study, but there was also a few things happened in 2001 which made me spend more time down the supply chain, further the consumer than at farming.
Yeah, because you are unusual in the fact that you have both been, a farmer, both in your very early days, plus now, plus have had experience in many facets through the whole supply chain, and not many people can say they've done both.
Yeah, and it was probably serendipitous, but what happened when I first started my Nuffield scholarship, I arrived in the UK in 2001, and it was when foot and mouth broke out in the UK. So essentially I was going as a Nuffield farming scholar to go and talk to farmers and talk to agriculture businesses, and the last thing they wanted was someone going to farm to farm.
Yeah.
In fact, most of the farms are under quarantine. So I ended up spending a big part of that time with supermarkets, with food processors, with distribution, with companies and organisations like Greenpeace and Friends of the Earth and LEAF, which was linking environment and farming. So really getting a lot of knowledge in the UK, particularly at that time, in Europe, on post-farm gate.
And is Europe now is it a good predictor of what sort of food and agricultural trends that we, say in Australia or in other places in the world, are going to experience?
Yes, proven to be that. And I think it was then. What I saw on that study was the health and wellness trend was far more advanced than it was in Australia. Traceability, organic farming, people trying to understand more about where food was from and that interconnection with the farmland. I spent a lot of time at the big supermarkets there, and one of the things that the farmers were really complaining about at the time, 20 years ago, was the impact of supermarkets and the pressure they were putting on agriculture. And so here we are, 2024, and in Australia it's exactly the same topic, and it's the topic of farmers and government trying to understand the influence of supermarkets on food production. And so there was a hot topic, and the QA systems people had to adhere to, the environmental standards they had to adhere to, people having impact on, so non-farming community, impact on how you farmed, how much nitrogen you put on the soil. In parts of Europe, back then, you had to submit a nitrogen budget to the local council to get approved so you could go and apply the nitrogen on your farm.
Yeah.
And if you talk about West Australian agriculture or any of our friends, or even on the farms we farm now, if we had to go and submit our nitrogen budget to the local council for approval, a lot of farmers would just, you know, be throwing their hands in the air, but that was happening 20 years ago.
Well, I was talking to someone at the conference we're both at OCAG a couple of weeks ago, and he's from Europe, and he was talking. I was asking about the current protests in France and Germany and stuff like that, and a lot of it is essentially red tape focused. You know, they've got a lot of other issues like subsidy reductions, etc. But the farmers are just going, look, there's just so much compliance now that we just can't keep up, or we're not big enough to keep up. You know, is this something, did you find, and so what you're finding is the pointing end of that back in 2000, really?
Yeah. And that's what we've seen, exactly where the farmers are in the UK and Europe now that are protesting, and similar issues are happening around the world, is that as particularly with the clean energy transition and the pursuit of net zero for carbon, as well as other environmental impacts on agriculture, that there is a lot of bureaucracy, there is a lot of compliance, and for small, medium-sized farms, that the actual cost and complexity of that is debilitating, because it's just so much work to actually do that and comply, and therefore you're seeing smaller farms struggle with that. It's easier for the larger corporate farms because they have, you know, environmental management divisions, they have OH&S divisions, they have HR divisions inside those companies, and therefore for them they're better equipped to manage that compliance.
Yeah, especially with ESG type stuff, and I always thought ESG is becoming a topic around every table at the moment in Australian agriculture, but it's been really a topic in Europe, and I don't know in America so much for quite a while, isn't it? Is there any lessons that we can learn from Europe around this environmental and social governance stuff? Because they've had this, I suppose, they've been impacted by non-farming community for a long time. And the expectations from an environmental compliance point of view has always been very high in Europe. What do you see in Europe now that, you know, can help us prepare at least mentally as farmers in Australia?
It's a good question. There's a lot of things about European. I mean, it's very different. It's different scale. It's different economics. It's different. The subsidy system that when I travelled on Nuffield, was, intrigued with and thought, how, this doesn't make sense. But when you take the time to listen to the farmers and understand the history and how that came in, you see why it's in place. I spent a fair bit of time in North America, so try to understand the impacts of, community on agriculture and food production in North America. It's a little bit different to Europe, but similarly, in particular states where there's a lot of urban sprawl, a lot of people living close to agricultural areas have a lot more impact. So I don't know what the lesson is for Australia. Yeah. I think we need to have open eyes and look and listen, and also be organised to think about how it can. It's not going to go away. It's going to be increasing pressure, but how do we make that more farmer friendly? How do we make it easier and less of a barrier to producing food sustainably than getting to the point where people are driving their tractors down the street? Yeah,
definitely. Now, you had this unique insight, so I want to hear a little bit more about the backstory. Obviously, the Chia Co, where things really took off for you, but it's like all overnight successes. It was a pretty long burn, right? So, from what I can aware, you discovered, if that's the right word, or become aware of chia seed when you're in Latin America somewhere.
Yeah. So what happened wasn't it? I finished my Nuffield scholarship and came home, and I was pretty clear that there were some mega trends that were coming to food and ag, and one of them was health and wellness. One of them was that consumers were going to have a lot more say and a lot more interest in how people farmed and the impact on the environment and the communities in which they farmed. So that was going to change. The other things I saw at the time was the impact of government policy, and I think it was Bush who just mandated biofuels, percentage of biofuels, right? And so all of a sudden I was going to research stations in North America, in the Midwest, that were growing corn, and breeding corn for food and animal feed, and they were changing all of their varietal work in the pursuit of ethanol because of change. So you can see the impact of government policy and how quickly it can change.
And that's almost happening
You see
now.
Carbon. You see the carbon, we saw it with MOS schemes. You see, if there's a flow of funds and government incentive in one direction, it can change how the landscape and land use happens really quickly.
But even now we've got this new mandate in different countries of this. Now they're just calling it renewable fuel, aren't they? Look, even big organisations like Formula One in 2026, I think, are mandating all fuel has to be renewable fuel. Now, if that goes through the whole supply chain, that's going to have quite a large impact on what people grow, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think this, what I've had the opportunity to go right through the food supply chain, right through from selling, finished products on the shelf in all the major retailers globally, selling Chia as an ingredient to all the major food manufacturers globally that have, most of the top 50 food manufacturers, worked with multiple food processors in countries all through North America, Europe and Asia, and then right back to the farms. And right back to not only the production, but then the crop genetics, so the breeding and the agronomics and the whole R&D package. So it's a really interesting sort of view of agriculture and food production, but what I've seen and what my biggest concern is now that some of these policies are going to get put in with good intent, but without fully understanding the impact. And that will be less land. I just read the other day, the first time ever agricultural land for food production is reduced this year in the US. So it's always increased as there's more land come on. 2024 is the first time there's been a reduction in available land.
So that means the available land, or is it going to other stuff like biofuels and...
There'll be some going back to nature, there'll be some going for carbon, there'll be some is urban sprawl. Significant urban sprawl on some of the most fertile agricultural land in the valleys in the US. And then there's probably degradation as well, but anyway, the net figure is the amount of land for food production is reduced.
And that's one of the great tragedies, isn't it? So when all these towns and cities were settled, they were settled generally on the best soil in wherever they were.
Well, usually on a river delta.
Yeah.
Right? That is where, because of transport and ports, most, the first settlements are near where the ocean meets the sea, and you've got river floodplains, and that's the best soil. Yeah. Because it's alluvial soil, and that's where you can grow crops and there's water. So that's happened. If you look anywhere in the world, it's happened. Now
it's all houses.
Correct. And it's easy to build houses on flat soil, and it's close to transport. So that's happened, and that continues to happen. If you go through parts of California, there's massive urban sprawl.
Yeah, right up that valley.
Up through the valleys, correct. And so that's happening, as well as all these other things are happening, and it's in every country.
Yeah. So back to chia seed. So how did chia seed? I mean, because I think you're probably the only person on the planet who knew anything about chia seed at that point, right?
Well, I didn't know. I knew that. So I came from the mega trend was health and wellness. So I was then starting to look for what are plant-based health solutions that will come into the diet. And I saw a little video that was about a group of, I think it was a university in southern US, I think University of Arizona. They had a group of people done a study of Mexicans living near the US border, and the population were mostly suffering, as they still do, chronic disease of obesity, diabetes, high cholesterol, eating a Western style diet. There was a group in the population they studied that weren't suffering the same effects, and the only thing the researchers could find that did different was consuming chia seeds.
There you go.
And they were consuming it in what they call chia fresca, so they would get some chia seeds, mix it with some lemon juice, some cayenne pepper, have a little juice, chia fresca every morning. And what they then learned was that was enough, because of the fibre and omega-3 in the chia, was stabilising their blood sugars, slowing the conversion of carbohydrates to sugars. They weren't getting the obesity issues, cholesterol issues and diabetes issues. So it sounded too good to be true for me. And I went, this sounds like a pretty amazing seed. And then started doing research and travelled to Mexico and parts of Latin America, tried to learn where it was growing, how it was grown, where it grew best. Try to understand why it was already in the food industry. And the key issue was no one had grown it on any scale with consistency that the food industry you start using it as an ingredient.
Yeah, so, and we talked about this the other night at the event, is scale is important to the food industry. So when you decide to bring chia seed and farm it really initially, that whole right through to distributing to 36 countries, in that journey, what was the biggest challenge? Is taking this seed from Latin America, bringing it to Australia and working out how to grow it at scale, or getting it into the food chain or distributing? Which was the biggest challenge for you?
It depended on the day, but they were equally challenging. And I look back now and go, I don't know how. If I'd have known the challenge, I definitely wouldn't have started. It was so getting to grow it. So what I was able to work out pretty quick from some research and travel around Latin America is the best chia grew at about 15 degrees north and south equator. Photoperiod sensitive crop, so the day length post flowering affects the amount of omega-3 in the oil. And so to get the right ratio of 3 to 6 in the oil, geography made a difference, or latitude specifically. And then it's a hydrophilic seed, so as soon as it gets wet, it gels up, which is one of the really great functional properties because it fills up, makes you feel full. The downside is if it gets wet when it's on the head, on the crop, it starts to gel. And it can create, even if it doesn't fully gel and ruin it, it starts to create issues with aflatoxins and fungal molds and stuff. So it's a challenging crop. So my basic research was if I go 15 degrees from the equator, north or south, painted in my sort of atlas with that, and then I went, I need distinct dry season to grow it with irrigation. And there's not too many places that do it in that latitude, but Kununurra in the Ord Valley was...
It was almost perfectly made for you, wasn't
15 south, good supply of water, good soil, and it happened at a time when the sugar industry was failing and the sugar mills closed. So I was able to go to Kununurra and knew some people, partnered with people who were looking for a new crop because sugar was failing and they were looking for a new crop.
So did it pose the same problems as crops? So a lot of people have taken crops to Kununurra because of exactly the same reasons and have been beaten back by disease and bugs and a whole lot of stuff. Did you face those same sort of challenges with the chia seed?
Yeah, well, look, we invested millions of dollars over the years in R&D and had our own private research programs going and worked really closely with the farmers. The farmers were key partners in the process of growing the crop and they were keen. Probably the biggest challenge was weeds. Because it's a broadleaf weed, most of the weed profile up there were broadleaves and we're trying to really grow a sustainable crop, low pesticide use. We obviously didn't want cultivation because you've got monsoonal rains come and just in the last week, huge amount of rain through there. So leaving the land exposed and, so they're just balancing that up, but to try and grow it without weeds and weed management, a big one. There's insect pests in the Ord, so managing that. And then managing really just, it's a really tiny seed and it takes really, high level of management as a crop to grow it well.
So to grow it, it's like a similar seed size to probably canola, most people use it, or maybe a bit smaller.
Smaller.
Yeah.
And it sheds. So if you leave it on the head and then this whole thing about swathing it and drying it and not getting wet, and so it's a challenging crop.
So you were really, because really this is, from what I can understand, one of the very first people to grow this at broad acre. Let's call it broad acre level.
Yep.
Right? You were having to develop a full agronomy package around this product, right? In the context of seed depth and weed control and nutrition and
everything.
Everything.
And a few Mexican people. I did meet a guy who was a great grandson of someone who'd grown it years ago. And he had little pot plants of it in Acatic in Mexico, in Guadalajara province. And we talked a lot about chia and the history behind it and how to grow it, and he'd grown it, but the issue was that was very small scale, and he was complaining anytime they grew a bit, they'd take it to market and people would like it and say how much is the price, and then they'd buy it, and then the next year some growers would grow it and then the price would crash and go up and down. Trying to really build for me it was trying to get stable, consistent production, so we could guarantee supply, a stable, consistent quality, and I had to then write the quality standards for chia globally and then take that to the food industry. And then also have a stable, consistent price. And that, to be honest, has been the biggest challenge because in a small traded crop, it's very hard to balance between oversupply and undersupply.
So in the context of grain globally, what sort of tonnages are we talking about?
Minuscule tiny, we're talking, tens of thousands of tonnes. So up to, at one stage, probably 100,000 tonnes was grown, but tiny. We've got farmers grow that in wheat and on their farms and wheat. But it's a high value crop, and if it goes into say a coloured bar or a yogurt or a smoothie drink or even a pudding, you're talking in grams.
Yeah.
Because it does expand and it's so nutritionally dense that it can, make an on-pack claim for omega-3 or fibre from a tiny.
Well, I think I was obviously because I knew you, but also for me as a consumer, it was really wacky in smoothies originally. You put in a tablespoon or a teaspoon into a smoothie every day.
Correct. Yeah.
You know, so that was, and chia puddings, which are almost ubiquitous now, aren't they?
Well, and it was actually the first ready-to-eat product, and it's part of the story from chia and then growing it as a crop and then taking it to food manufacturers, because the question earlier was how hard it was. I mean, that was taking an unknown product to a supermarket or a food manufacturer
that they've never heard of.
They've never heard of it. They know their customers have never heard of it. They know no one else is like that. It's impossible. Like it's impossible. It took a lot. In fact, to get the Australian market to really crack, we had to do it in the US and then demonstrate in the US and come back and show Australian retailers this is what's on the shelf.
So that's almost like the old Malcolm Gladwell tipping point people. You needed those really early innovators, those health innovators to go, okay, there's something here to. So how did you find those people, those people at the bleeding edge of the health industry, to pick this up and start talking about it?
I had a very, very good team in marketing and around me that understood innovation and the psychology behind that. We had to have a very long-term vision for it, because if you a lot of people were saying just promote this as a weight loss product and it'll pop and it'll be the next thing, it'll go crazy. And we sat back from that and said it probably will, but then it'll go. It'll be like one of those things that comes and goes. My vision was chia was in the diet in 50 years. People everywhere are eating a little bit every day because it's nutritional. But to do that, you have to then build the platform. So we were talking a lot to naturopaths, dietitians, clinical doctors, doing some work with cardiac unit at Melbourne University, Royal Melbourne Hospital. We were really trying to show to people the efficacy was right, and it worked. Like if you can include this in your diet, it's not magic, but if you include a bit of chia in your diet on a daily basis, it will improve your health through these.
So you had to prove the science.
Look, mostly we're proving the nutritional composition because people knew omega-3s. And there's a bit of education around omega-3. There's plant-based and fish-based, and ALA is the one that's heart health mostly, and fish-based is more cognitive health. But we were then educating the benefit of omega-3 ALA in the diet. We're also showing there was a high level of fibre in chia, both soluble and insoluble fibre, which is now the market's learning a lot more about prebiotics and probiotics, and the fact that the biota in the gut needs the prebiotics, which is the food for the probiotics to operate on. And so we were sort of 20 years ago, this is pretty early conversation.
I think this is, really, it's starting to become common conversation now. Like I don't know, lost 24 years later?
Well, that's the conversation I was having with people and doctors and scientists then about gut health and cognitive health and people's well-being through the gut. I mean, these were the nutty scientists I'd find at a university down there. But it was people had done studies on it and showing if we can get people's gut health right, there's so much benefit for their overall health from that. And so, I think what we're seeing now is a bit of a resurgence in the demand for chia, both because of the pudding thing. So, you go to any good cafe, anywhere in the world, whether it's a Starbucks or it's your local, specialty cafe, they'll have a chia pudding. And really the genesis of chia puddings, we'd be at demonstrations at Whole Foods in the US or anywhere, and I'd have bags of chia seeds, and you can't really demo dry seeds, right? So we mix them up with some coconut milk or almond milk, turn them pudding, maybe put some fruit in there, maybe put something on top, and people would eat those and go, these are delicious, how do we make chia puddings? And so we then took that and said we need to commercialise the pudding, and we started Chia Pods and trademarked that globally, took Chia Pods globally, and then really a few years ago, when we've gone as far as we can with chia, it was a very deliberate decision to be, as deep expertise in chia, and that got us in the innovation rooms of Kellogg and PepsiCo and those, because I was the chia expert globally. But then the goal was how do we now take that knowledge and take it to the plant-based food market and snacking market, and we rebadged the chilled part of our business, Fancy Plants, and now we do chia puddings, we do rice puddings, we do protein puddings using fava bean protein, we do a whole range of other plant-based snacks.
So that's the thing, so it took you it's taken decades to get to the point you are now. And I think one of the things that I really wanted to explore today is, when we go to farming events like we were at a couple of weeks ago, the huge conversations about farming margins, tech, all this sort of stuff. And And there's always a theme of conversation as we need to make more money at the farm gate, and you know, the money's at the other end of the food chain, and yada yada yada, right? But what you're talking about here is, and I think I really want to better understand this, is yes, there's a lot of risk in farming, and yes, it's, you know, you've got to make margin, etc. But it doesn't mean that it's all unicorns and rainbows in the rest of the food chain. Yeah.
I think that's the thing I've learned over the last 20 years. There is a perception when you're on the farm that everyone else is making more money than you are, right? And you think it's a lot easier down the supply chain because you see it. If you sell lamb for $4 a kilo,
yeah,
and then you go into the supermarket and see chops at 40 or 50, you go, someone's making some screaming profit.
yeah.
The reality is there's a percentage of that lamb is sold for that. There's a whole lot that hasn't, and there's a whole lot of other costs in processing, manufacturing, distribution, cold chains. So it's, you know, that's an example. But and I've seen it myself going, this is what it's cost to grow Chia, this is what, you know, the farmers are working with us are getting at farm gate level. Then I know the bundle of costs to the cent of freight, distribution, testing, analysis, quality certification, storage, handling, testing again, you know, distribution. Then getting to a supermarket, and I know the supermarket margins again to the percentage, and we debate that at every review meeting with them. And then I know what they're selling at the shelf and what the consumer's paying.
Yeah.
And there are times when the supermarket is taking a bigger bite of that supply chain than they should, and there's other times they're not. There's also times in supply chains in food, right through when we're selling a finished product on the shelf,
Yeah.
that it's tighter, and then other times there's a bit of margin. It's really interesting though. I don't think in food, I don't think there's anyone making supernormal profits consistently across the board. There are times and it swings up and down.
And I think that swings and roundabouts. Like you look at the last probably 2 or 3 years in the grains industry, there's been obviously super profits at the farm level,
Yeah.
which means mills and processors have been doing their share on margin, right?
Exactly.
So it is really
Well, and I've got some farming, I've got a farming business, I've got a research business, and I've got the plant-based food and retail business. And it's been really interesting through that lens, because people ask me, where's the money in agriculture? Well, you know, the research business got tough because labour's gone up, we're competing against mining companies for resources, people and plant equipment, all those costs have really gone up. So that's, you know, that's got tighter as there's been inflationary costs. The food business really has struggled through COVID, where we had massive acceleration of raw materials. So the chocolate flavoured ones, the cocoa price gone through the roof, still cacao's going through the roof, sugar got expensive, packaging, everything, and labour, energy at the factories, everything went up. And the supermarkets, you only really get 1, maybe 2 chances to put it up, and you've got to get a price increase at a supermarket. Those of you listeners that don't know, I mean that's a big dossier that you submit, and they generally knock it back. This is to get 10 cents increase, right? Yeah. And then you go again months later and try, and in the meantime, the suppliers just put up the price of the material, and so you're copying the squeeze. The other thing that happened through COVID was supply chains just got fractured. Ships were.
So you're distributing to a lot of countries at this point. So
yeah, well, we were any of the materials that make a chocolate pudding. The chocolate doesn't grow in Australia. The packaging mostly doesn't. A lot of the material, you know, if we're using coconut-based product, coconut milks, that's coming in from Asia. So there's certainly we're bringing products in, we're taking products out, and let's say there was some product coming from South America to us that would normally take 45 days on water. That took us. It left a Rica port in Chile, and it got to us. And so let's say that was normally 45 days. That took 9 months for the container to get to us. So there was a customer order we lost and all that. So this is the sort of stuff that was happening through COVID. So we've got through that, and then this big, inflation. So that business really felt a lot of pain. Now we're starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel there. Some of the labour constraints are moving. Some of the massive inflation with raw materials has come off a bit. Been able to get a couple of price rises through. So you can see how that one starts to improve. Farming was really good. Grain farming, wheat farming, through that COVID period, and particularly in WA, there was all the incentives for farmers that weren't really affected by COVID. There was government stimulus, there was cheap money, there was accelerated depreciation on plant equipment, right? And then there was a Russian war on Ukraine that again spiked grain prices through the roof, right? And good seasons on top of it. So the wheat farming business went through a fabulous period.
Yeah.
And the other thing that happened at that time was massive appreciation of farmland,
Well, I
like
think
through
that-
record
Yeah, well, I think in either 22 or 23, I think 36% increase a year
per annum.
per annum on,
Yeah.
you know, you take that asset anywhere on the planet, like.
Well, and that was off a pretty strong base anyway,
Yeah.
right? And so that is, I don't think we've ever seen that, both in real terms as a percentage in farmland in Western Australia. So it's huge.
Inventory, so I want to really unpack risk because people often don't see, it's the same this conversation in the food chain in particular. You know, most of our listeners will understand risks in farming really well, right? But most of us, including me, don't understand the risks in the food chain. And we're talking about supply risk, inventory risk, trying to get into large retailer risk. Before I get into the retailer risk, because that's a really interesting conversation. Inventory, but you know that supply chain you were mentioning about being interrupted. One of the things I found from my friends who carry stock is they had to order double, triple their normal quantities. So because they didn't know when they were going to get stock, right? So they're carrying massive inventory. So that's all balance sheet stuff, right? Now, I got an email from a bookseller the other day and they're discounting all their books because they ordered like 10 times the amount of, because they could only get a print run annually. And now they're left with warehouses full of books that they're trying to dump. And now I assume that's happening across the supply chain. So it's going to be happening in cars, it's going to be happening in mechanics, like this extra inventory that was essentially built up during COVID. Did you experience that or was it food chain?
No, definitely. I mean, I think anyone that was a student of a business school over the last 20 years, it was all about moving towards just-in-time, flexible supply chains, lowering your inventory because that's where your capital's tied up, outsourcing, you know, and running. And that's been a really good model until the model breaks, and that was COVID broke it. And so you then go, we've got to have more stock on hand. It went from a global model to more in-country. We did the same. We were manufacturing out of Europe, bringing stuff in. We're manufacturing in Thailand. All of a sudden, it's all coming to Australia. So the cost of manufacture is high, but you know we needed to get products made. And so inventory management, and that is what makes or break in the food industry, particularly perishable. So we're making chilled, perishable product. You do not have the latitude to make a bit more and hold it because it goes out of date, and then it's worth nothing. So anyone in perishable foods, and this is the same when we talk about people in production of fresh produce. There's some you can store, but any of those that highly perishable or chilled, that is managed to the day. And
I was listening on the radio the other day. And it was actually veggie growers complaining about the price pressure they get put under.
Yeah.
Because their product is perishable, so someone can go, I'm not really interested today, and they actually
you got no leverage.
And they have zero leverage because they got to move it.
Well, very different. So I'm sitting there talking to a grain marketing consultant, and I will hold some canola, or we'll hold some wheat, or we'll move it. So you got the luxury of it, right?
Yeah.
You cannot do that with a chilled product that's going to go out of date in 35 days. And if you've got carrots or berries that are going to go in 7-10 days, like you just don't have that luxury. So it takes fine-tuned management, and you have to make some margin on the good times to cover, because there'll be times where you don't make any.
So the parallel I'm drawing here is that really, the whole supply chain have got a lot in common. The capital risk you're facing, farmers have their own risks, but so do everybody up and down the food chain face different but similar challenges, really.
Yeah, I mean, it is different. Broadacre farming is different. There's definitely it's capital intensive. It's good when the value of that real estate's going up, strong balance sheets. If you're trying to grow, it means you've got to outlay more capital to acquire more land, or any of the models really require land and scale. So that's got a set of risks in it. If you're trying to manage succession through that process, and you've had massive appreciation of land values, that has another set of issues. And input costs are high. So the bigger the scale, the bigger the working capital, then your working capital management, cost of money, all of those things, they compound risk as well. So
that's one of the great challenges at the moment, really, with that. Yes, the margins have been pretty good, and there's been good years, lots of appreciation, but the table stakes now are pretty big. The capital you need to outlay in a broadacre operation in particular is massive.
Yeah, and if you're in growth mode, people are exiting or sort of paused on their growth phase, it's a little different. But if you're in growth mode, then that's still a big challenge because while the land you do have is appreciated in value, it's all the boats have risen with that tide. And so if you're looking at the place next door or down the road or you're diversifying out of a geography, that's all gone up. And so there's more capital required.
It's one of the arguments I always said to my people I know who are in the financial advice industry, because they always talk about, your home's your biggest asset. And I go, yeah, but not really, because it's not liquid. What are you going to do, sell and live in a caravan? Because every other home's expensive, your home's expensive.
Yeah, look, I think in food, again, it's good to participate across the industry. I think it's, there'll be times when parts of the supply chain industry has a better time than others. And it generally swings and roundabouts. It's just a matter of having the right business strategy to try and manage through that. And I spend less time, and when I get the opportunity to talk to people about it, is try and understand a bit further down the supply chain rather than just pointing the finger at it, because that helps you a lot. Because ultimately, your partner's in it, right?
Yeah.
So if the person growing something is selling to the next person's supply chain, if that's a transactional adversarial relationship, ultimately it doesn't work, right?
Well, it doesn't. You don't need either your. So in this, take it right back to the farm level. You need your farm supply in town to make good margin, right? Because then they're going to stay in town and they're going to carry stock. If they're not making margin, they're going to lose them.
Exactly.
Right, and that's right through the food chain, isn't it? Whether they be supplying you, vegetables or the grain or anything. You both have to clip the ticket, otherwise it doesn't work, does it?
No, and I used to talk, one of the things I had the opportunity with Chia is that was not an industry that was there before. There wasn't sort of a whole lot of structures and bodies that ran or governed that for the last 100 years. So I was able to set up Chia industry from a clean slate. And my philosophical position to the guys that I was partnering with was, let's create this like a farmer's market on a global scale. That is, how do we replicate the farmer's market model, which is the consumer knows where the food's come from, they understand where it's come from, they know who the farmers are that've grown it, and there's fair value along the supply chain. That doesn't mean we don't go direct, as in we're not using other parties along the supply chain, but let's keep it transparent, let's keep it as open and communicative across that supply chain, because we're all in it together, rather than someone trying to bash up the next person and get that little bit extra. A traditional supply chain is you're making money by selling a bit more to that guy and paying the one before you a bit less, right? And you take the gap in the middle. Now, philosophically it's good, in practice it's hard, because everyone is looking out for their own part of the business along the way. But my mantra to our team and working with people is, if it's more of a partnership approach, because you need them, there's no point bashing someone up in supplying you or driving such a deal on the other end that they go, well, I'll walk, I can't do it.
In saying that, do you think we should, whenever we go to these agricultural events that we all turn up to, that we should have people like yourself and like the big suppliers and stuff like that, or the big retailers, coming in and explaining, connecting, so as farmers and as retailers and as other people in the chain, we do get that understanding. Go, okay, yes, it's all easy to point fingers at each other, but let's just understand each other's business models, like you do with your because you're unique, you understand, say, the Coles business model and your business model, and so you can have an open discussion about it. But not many people can they?
No, and look, my advice would be just listen, don't. The trouble is people will invite someone in from a supermarket or a food processor or whoever, and most of the people in that forum will be standing up, pointing a finger at them, absolutely shouting them down. It's like, well, you're not learning from that, right? Yeah. You're telling them what's wrong. I think if they can listen, if we can listen and really understand, then that's a much more productive way to work out, because everyone's got the challenges, right? And so, I think if in any of those agri or farming forums, the people who come in, we're listening, we're asking questions, and we're trying to understand. So the thing I always tell them is, seek first to understand and to be understood. And if you do that, then you come away with the learning, and then you go, okay, now we get it. So maybe their problem is, we should carry the stock to them. They've got an inventory management problem. Maybe we can hold this a little bit longer in our place. Maybe we can share a cool store together. Maybe we can work out trucking freights and backloading easily together. How do we, because you've seen cool chain trucks that broke in administration, one of the biggest in Australia. That was a massive issue for us. So we've been paying to get our products from our cool store, from our factory to cool store to Coles and Woolworths. All of a sudden, the biggest cool chain trucking company in Australia goes into administration. Now that's been absorbed now, but all of a sudden we can't truck our product.
Yeah.
So that trucking company being driven harder and harder and harder on the margins and the costs and the trucking fees and the fuel and till bang, a crack. And so
Do you know what's happening across the whole economy? I was just listening the other day. So there's a bit of conversation about, I think bank branch is closing, it's sort of, and here's an interesting thing that came out of all that. Armaguard, who run all the cash through the whole economy, are going broke. Right? Why? Because no one uses cash anymore and there's no margin left in it. So now there's this liquidity, well, literally a liquidity problem. So now everybody in the whole financial industry is going, well, how are we going to survive? Because we've just assumed that this is just going to, like you with your trucking, it's just going to happen. But when all these shifts happen, you know, okay, we really need you guys to keep trucking money.
Yeah, I think what happens when there is a disruption in supply chain, and look, not everyone's got the headspace in their life to think about all of that, but you know, we'll see a flood across the Nullarbor now,
Yeah.
and we'll see a train line and a road get closed. You walk into the supermarkets in here in the next 5 to 7 days, and you'll work out pretty quick what's shipped from Melbourne or Sydney or Brisbane and what's local, and it's a lot.
And people will overreact. So consumers will go, I remember my wife and I having the same conversation. Jesus, what do we buy that coming across the Nullarbor? Okay, we better stock up. Right? And everybody,
the problem.
and then so suddenly you turn up a week later and there's none of that in the supermarket.
We saw the COVID impact on toilet paper, toilet tissue in Perth, which was just crazy.
It was humorous for the rest of the world.
You're not going to consume any more of it because we're in lockdown, but it's, and it just, what happened, it cleaned the shelves out, so that creates more demand, like there's false demand, and then everyone's panicking about it.
Yeah, and then you get these inventories.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it becomes now I just wanted to roll back, actually, we're talking about capital costs, and this is what you and I were talking about a couple of weeks ago. We understand farming capital risk fairly well, but you're talking about the cost of getting product and the risk of getting product into retailers. Now you've done it in the UK, America, here, you know, these getting product on the shelf and the capital risk to you as a I don't know what you call it, a manufacturer in getting product on the shelf. Can you explain to the listeners a little bit more about that? Yeah.
So we've done it in both ambient and chilled, and ambient there's a bit more latitude, but a slower turning SKU products. Whereas a chilled turns quicker, but shorter shelf life, and it's a really interesting difference. The shorter the shelf life, the harder it is, because you just got to be so finely tuned on your management. And if something goes out of date, you lose it. So that product's basically written off. There are a few little avenues where you can get it into food banks and stuff, but once it goes past its expiry date, but mostly it's not expiry, sorry. It's a longer story, but the supermarkets require it with 75% of its life when it comes on. So there's a buffer there for them as well, and a buffer down the time. But the capital is the working capital and everything that's been worked up to make a product and then manufacture it and ship it and deliver it. So there's a whole bundle of costs have gone into that to then make a fairly thin margin at retail level and then return that, and then supermarkets have a pay cycle as well. So your working capital cycle is a big thing that we watch very closely. Is the time between we spend money on a product when we receive it, and the longer that working capital cycle, the more money is out. And so as you grow, capital management is really, really critical.
And also the risk. So a supermarket, from what I can understand, aren't going to keep stocking your product if it's not performing at a margin level on the shelf. So
no, you don't get a contract from a supermarket, so you just get some shelf space that has been, agreed, and then how it performs is your responsibility.
Yeah, so you're sitting there now, you geared up your business to supply, and I assume these big retailers, you've got to supply serious volume, right? So you've had to gear up manufacturing and everything to supply that volume. And if your product stops performing, then you're left holding the baby, really, aren't you?
Yeah, and there's regular reviews. So what happens is, once we're seeing the data every day.
Okay.
They see the data every day. I see it by store, by SKU. So I know, what's sold in Sydney, Melbourne, Perth, different stores. by flavour, by product. It's really interesting data to see.
Yeah.
And you see the trends, and you see what happens if you done a price promo dropping by 10%.
So your marketing or your strategy could be informed a bit by that data.
Yeah, definitely. And there's really interesting that different demographics respond differently to price promos. Some respond differently to other promotional activity.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, you're trying to get that and trying to understand the cycles. And we're just launching some new flavours and some new products at the moment. And so we've got an expectation of how well they'll sell.
Yeah.
So we bought packaging and made products for an expectation. If it sells better, then we're very quickly going to dial up because we've got a...
Yeah, so you've got a manufacturing plant. So this is the fancy plants business, which is really taken over the chia pudding sort of the chill part of the product. So, you do, I've seen your hot pink, beautiful packaging, etc. And so, like you said, so you've got a manufacturing facility that's producing these beautiful packaged things, right? But you don't know which flavours or which things are going to perform going forward. So do you have to say, okay, we're going to run an experiment in, say, X retailer with this flavour, and if it goes, we've got to put aside a certain amount of our manufacturing capacity towards that now? Or?
Yeah, well, and so that's, the benefit of being in the game a little bit, and these products have been on the shelf now for 50 months, so you sort of know, you're starting to start. You don't know a new flavour, you don't know a new pack format, how it's going to go, but we look at a lot of data, we look at competitive data, we look at a lot of analytics. And so you don't get the opportunity to try a couple of supermarkets. You either get a listing and you're in, all of them or half of them.
Well, that's the thing, talking about capital risk. You don't get to go, can I just try Coles in? No.
So we do consumer panels and tasting stuff, but you never really know until it hits the shelf. So that's the risk. And you go and gear up for a certain flavour. And some don't work. Some don't work for a number of reasons, or they work in one place and not another. And it's really...
And that's the thing, with the supermarket, you can say, we know this works in Lower North Shore, Sydney, but it's just not going to work in Melbourne or Perth or whatever. And do you adjust that inventory? Or
the supermarkets do have different clusters.
Okay.
So you can target a certain cluster, which they have them sort of named by different levels, sort of...
They're personas that they...
Yeah. But it's really interesting. So in Western Australia, for example, you would think our products are typically bought by health-focused, health-forward, more premium shopper because they're not a budget product, and yet we will go to supermarkets in demographics that are younger. The postcode as far as affluence is lower, and yet they sell 3 times as what they will in some of the most affluent suburbs.
Yeah,
and that is because while if you're looking at demographics on total sort of wealth, they may be more elderly shopper and they're just a different consumer. And so what we're seeing is some of our strongest consumers and sales are in younger suburbs, up and coming suburbs, young families. They on sort of wealth status, they wouldn't be as high, but they are prepared to spend more on diet and more on health and wellness.
It'd be endless learning, wouldn't it?
And it just, some of the time you build hypotheticals, you build hypothesis in your mind of what's going to work and not going to work, and you get it challenged and you see something totally different. It's fascinating. It's fascinating how same product in different parts of Australia. And then when we used to see this globally. So you see some major trends, whether you're in Whole Foods or Tesco in the UK, and then you see it localised, and it's fascinating.
And do you see trends in those demographics like Whole Foods and Tesco's and stuff that you go, okay, wow, that's going to hit us soon? Because there's a general conversation, or it is in the world of influence, social media and stuff, do those trends just move so much quicker now?
That's one thing I've seen over the last decade. Social media has accelerated on the upside and the downside. So I was going to say Taylor Swift, but it wasn't. It was another, it might have been Kendall Jenner, ate some chia somewhere, right? Okay. And was seen, and all of a sudden you just see, boom, there goes.
And does that happen globally? Or just
no, it happens globally, because everyone is on social media dialed into the same.
Okay.
And, if it was Taylor Swift, it would have been a big glory. But it was Meghan Markle. So she said something, wrote something, and this was when she was sort of
Star was on the rise.
Star was right up there a few years ago, and in the UK, the shelves just got cleaned out of cheap.
Wow.
Because I think she just posted something, or literally she might not have, someone just tweeted something, there was a photo of her eating some cheese, she might have said something about it, and all of a sudden, boom, they just...
So you can see why the influencer power, especially genuine influencers, like, you know, are so powerful for brands, can't you? Like,
and I think getting more power, I'm a little bit of a cynic of social media, to be honest, and thought we're going to probably see peak socials and then it's going to drop off and people are going to go, oh, influencers getting paid, so it's not real. And they get paid, and they make a fortune out of it, those big influencers. But more and more the community look at it and they want to be like those people and do what they do. And so that has huge power, and when we've got a whole generation now that are just, they live their life through social media and through their iPhone, and that has changed traditional advertising and marketing. It's just thrown it on its head. And it's fascinating, and if you can make it work, it's super powerful. We had Kelly Slater as a brand ambassador a few years ago, and you know, in the scheme of people following him, it's nothing like those mega influencers. But we had a really, really strong consumer set that believed in what Kelly did. His longevity, health and wellness, what cares about his food. Top performer, you know, won at 18 and won at 40, and so that was very much a lifestyle and a person that aligned with our brand.
Because that's what you're buying, you're not just buying celebrity, you're buying the whole package.
Yeah, exactly, that's it. And so he was really, really positive for us. And one of the things I loved about Kelly was when he said, you know, he'd been approached by big energy drink brands and stuff to be a brand ambassador, and he rejected that. But when we spoke to him, he said, no, I love what you're about. I'll be a brand ambassador for you as long as I can come to the farms, as long as I can meet the farmers, as long as I can understand the crop. And he flew up, we spent days up in the York Valley together and went down fishing. His dad was a fisherman from Florida, and he was fabulous and just loved it. But he was so intense on understanding what was happening in the soil, what was happening in the environment, what was happening to the river system, what was happening to the farmers, and understanding Chia, because he cared so much about what he put in his body.
That's great. So, you know, so he had a high level of integrity as an ambassador.
Off the charts, amazing,
Yeah. I just want to talk about, quickly, so we started this conversation about your big journey on finding future trends. So what are you seeing at the moment, without giving away what you think is competitive to you, but so as farmers, whether you be growing vegetables, you know, livestock or grains, what are the big trends you're globally exposed? What are the big trends that you are seeing coming down the pipeline?
Yeah, it's interesting. I was just reading an article. So this week is Expo West, which is a massive, massive natural and health trade show in California, which I'm normally at. But it starts today, and you know, this will showcase a lot of the innovation, small companies and the big companies that have got natural product. And I was reading someone sort of saying what we're going to see this year at Expo West. What I'm seeing now is not a lot different to what I saw 20 years ago when I did my Nuffield and said, what are the trends in food and ag? What we're now seeing in a more granular and more specific trend, you know, within that. So people do care more about what they're eating and nutrition in it. The consumer's awareness of what's in food and the nutritional components of it has just gone off the charts. And partly social media, but kids that in the past wouldn't have known how to read a label on a pack, wouldn't have known what it meant, are now super engaged and super knowledgeable in food, and that they're influencing their parents. Right? They're looking for sugar, how much sugar there is. They're looking for other things in food. So that will keep going. I think as I flagged earlier, the connectivity between gut health and cognitive health, and people understanding what they eat in their diet, how that affects their mood, how it affects their sleep, how it affects their performance, how it affects a whole lot of other things, is the science is really going to the next level, and the understanding of that at consumer levels. So that will drive foods. You'll see a lot more foods that come out with deeper relationship with nutrition, but also cognitive health. And then I think the other thing is, which I saw then, is the consumer's interest and society's interest in what's happening with food production and farmland and the environment is going to the next level. And part of that is government policy, and part of that is other things that are happening. But I think as we've gone away from this connectivity of people that lived on land and ate food from that land to being totally disconnected, social media and other things have now brought it back together. And I think that desire for people to know where their food's come from and what's in it and who grows is going to be next level. So there's opportunities will come out of that, whether it's through traceability, whether it's farmers telling the story, whether it's through differentiation of products. But I think the other thing that will be the sort of curveball in all of this, which will create a lot of public debate, is this debate between clean energy, the debate between net zero, the debate between land, how land is used. Is it for saving the planet? Is it for environmental? Is it for carbon sequestration? Or is it for food production? Or is it energy production through biofuels? And
that's so this whole, how do we use that land? Yeah. Can we have our cake and eat it?
And people that have not typically been that interested in farmland will get interested. And we're seeing it already. We're seeing big funds getting interested in it that weren't typically interested in it. We're seeing oil and gas companies that were never interested in farmland being super interested in acquiring it. We're seeing, policymakers that had very little interest in what was happening in farmland now having a really big interest in it.
So it's becoming a not just a valuable asset that everyone who's been involved in farmland forever understands, but now it's almost becoming everybody's starting to value it mentally as well. Like they're going, okay, this is important to our existence.
And look, when there's food on the shelf and no one's really short of it, the conversation around food shortage is not there, because you want, there may be on pricing. There's a big difference between price of food and availability of food if you can't get it. And things change. And we saw this back a decade or so ago when there was some crop failures in Mexico and Africa, some drought issues. The word was 36 hours between a stable society and anarchy. Day one, there's no food there, people get a bit edgy. Day two, they go back and there's no food available and they're starting to make a lot of noise. By day three, there's riots, right?
Yeah.
And so it's just when we've got a global situation where there is less land available, where there is more people consuming, increasing consumption, and changing diets, so more animal-based foods are being consumed, which mostly is consuming plants to feed animals, which is a lower conversion benefit.
And that's one of the interesting challenges coming back. As soon as you're saying, reading off all those environmental and carbon and stuff things, there's been an increasing debate around, are people eating more plants? Because you're in the plant-based industry. Are you seeing that trend? Purely because I'm thinking of the young consumer now, like they're under 35, so we're super conscious about this. That the generation coming through are, and depending on what country, are eating more plant focused diet, or is that something that is really isolated to a certain demographic within the world?
Yeah, it's probably the latter. I think there's awareness. I think it depends which part of the planet you're talking about. I think it's, some of the big markets are still going through changing where they want more animal-based foods, so that dwarfs the transition to plant-based in other markets. There was a study, the Lancet study, which was, I think, published 2 years ago, and this was a group of scientists, and it was basically they were charged with saying, how do we save the world, and how do we, from population, health and wellness, and sustainability of food, and then the planet. And what I liked about their study, or their single recommendation, was if currently the world consumes 2/3 of the diet animal-based and 1/3 plant-based, if we can change that to the opposite, to 1/3 animal-based, 2/3 plant-based, it essentially solves the problem. And that's sort of so we sell a lot of vegan products, a lot to the vegan market. I'm not vegan. We try to eat more plant-based foods in our diet, mostly for health and wellness perspective.
Yeah.
If society can make that change, then that has huge implications on sustainability, as well as chronic disease. It's from overeating, highly processed animal-based foods. So.
And this might happen. All those changes you were just reeling off. If there's going to become competition between human food and animal food and biofuel, for example, then, a lot of animal agriculture outside the grass-fed industry uses a lot of grain to feed beef and pigs and chickens, etc. Is that it'll push the costs up for those industries, which obviously in the long term it'll make those products more expensive to grow. So it might happen organically, is probably not the right word, but eventually purely because of the competition of those resources.
Yeah. I don't know how it plays out. I think there's an education piece. I think there's market dynamics. I think there's consumer awareness. As I say, people will not stop eating animal-based foods. Right? And when I talk to people in the beef industry, the dairy industry, I say, there's no threat that people are not going to be eating dairy products and they're not going to be eating animal-based beef, pork, chicken. They're eating more of it, right? Yeah. Consumption's increasing. My thing is, I think we can have really balanced diets with more plant-based in it and give consumer choice. So if they're looking for plant-based options, we can make delicious, healthy, nutritious plant-based options.
And literally those, if animal-based products end up being, like you said, let's say assume that it went like that and it became a third, it's going to become a very valuable third.
Absolutely.
It's like the wool industry now. It's a niche industry for high-end products, right? And even as a grower, whether you're growing beef or wool or lamb or whatever, if your product's really high value product, even in that, how many decades it's going to take maybe to get to that point, it's still going to be a valuable thing to grow. A couple of things, just to finish off. Young people, or just even anyone, so if you're in the farming industry and you have a entrepreneurial seizure, I love that term, it comes from the E-Myth, to get in beyond farm gate, right? And many farmers have successfully done this with all sorts of things. Dairy generally done better, I think, more than most. What piece of advice would you give them, before leaping into that particular, I don't know, frying pan to a fire? I don't know what the right analogy is.
I think it's a good question, and I've been asked it a lot. I think it depends what you want to do.
Yeah.
So if you've got a apple orchard and you say, I want to I don't want to sell just apples to Coles and Woolies or the markets, I want to go further than this. It really depends what you want. And if you say, now I want to diversify my business by having some open picking on my farm, or I want to make an apple cider, or I want to, that is, if you can do it on your property and you can do it at sort of, not cottage level is not the right word, but small scale, and that gives you the opportunity to participate and talk to consumers, and it's more of a farmer's market type. That can be a really successful, really unique opportunity, and you can have a fabulous business doing it. It could be the same in dairy, it could be the same in meat. If you want to bring, get some particular breed or some lamb and produce a certain way and get it processed and then sell them at a farmer's market, or that can be a really good business. And it's across you might make, I don't know, bars out of chia seeds and sell them in the local market. And that can be a really nice business. We can sell them online. The challenge is if you then expect you're going to take that to supermarket chains and you're going to take it and supply it 12 months of the year, 365 days a year, and you're going to manage that business, that not only capital but headspace and management is a huge ask. Yeah. And you need scale. So then it's about, can my farming business produce that? And if it can't, then I've got to deal with other farmers and work with other farmers to produce it. Are we all in the same geography or different geographies? Can it be global? Who's going to process it? And just that gap between taking a product, which is taking the products you're currently growing down the supply chain a bit further, to setting up a food business is a massive jump. And my recommendation, and there's nothing wrong with that, I think that's there's a fabulous opportunity there as well. And as you say, plenty of companies and co-ops have done that really well. It's just you need scale to make that work. And so the biggest challenge is trying to do that incremental one, because at some point, unless you've got really clear strategic plans, say when we're national in 2,000 stores or international in 20,000, how are we going to span through those different stages?
It's that whole crossing the chasm thing is you can bootstrap it to a certain point, and after that, it's a massive.
And that's clearly going to be so, well, we'll bootstrap to here, or we will manage it ourselves to this point, knowing that our goal is X, and at that point we're going to bring in new partners and investors. We're going to, build a factory, buy a factory. We're going to partner with someone. Like, that's all good. I think it takes a huge amount of energy, huge amount of passion, and the big difference I find when I look at our food business versus the farming business is there's not a day off. Like, it's every single day when you're selling a perishable product in a Coles or Woolies or any supermarket. The phone and email goes every day because the truck won't have rolled up at the dock at the right time, or we didn't get the order today. We thought it was going to be 27 cases and we got 22, and so we got 2 extra. Or someone didn't roll up at a factory, or a truck. Like, it just, and that's every day.
Yeah, because we've got friends who own a trucking business who truck perishable food around the East Coast.
Yeah.
24/7.
And it's every day. It's Christmas Day as well. Like, it's just, and so it's, I find that between coming from a farming business where you're really dialed up for seeding and harvest, and you have these intense period, extreme hours, really hard, and you go hard, and farmers still do it. Like, it's full on. We see it in our research business. In seeding time, you've got a window to plant, and you've got a window, and so everyone is working super hard and doing crazy hours. And in the research business, they're doing a lot of kilometres because they're doing trials between Inno in the north and South Coast and everywhere in between. So there's just a lot of people driving a lot of places. But the difference in the food business is it's just constant every day. And so it's just, it depends what you love.
And sometimes it's careful what you wish for.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So that wouldn't mind anyone thinking about going further down the supply chain. I talked to someone the other day who's an experienced food executive, and he started in fresh juice, and that company, so he's an executive, he sort of gets brought in as a gun CEO, and then he went into bread and baking products, and now he's in chocolate. And he said, I went from products that had 30-day shelf life to products with about, I think, 60 to 100 or something like that. And now going to ones that have got 2 years shelf life. And he said, you've done the opposite, boss. You've gone from products that had like years of shelf life, and you're getting shorter and shorter. He said, this is not good for you.
I know. Just maybe to finish off a couple of things. I want to know, have you got, I always say that because of what you just talked about before, there's a big disconnect between those of us in ag and those who aren't in ag anymore. So when we were all going through school, pretty much everyone either had a father or an uncle of someone that was in farming. So now that's not existing. So there's a lot of myths still around ag, especially on the front of egg packets and God knows what else, right? Yeah. What's sort of like a common myth or miss you see all the time that you wish could be exposed a bit more? Or?
Yeah, there's 2 things. I think one is that everyone else other than the farmers making money out of ag, and I think that's what we talked about that earlier. But it's the food supply chain and fibre, but it's pretty tough. The margins are not huge for anyone. There'll be periods when this is better or worse, but it's even government, they don't really want food to be really, a lot of people make a lot of money out of food, right? They actually don't, because it's sort of a natural thing to keep a lid on it, keep the lid on the prices.
Well, they get into trouble when food prices go up.
Exactly. So there's 2 things. They're happy when the price of property goes up, because everyone's kind of happy with that unless they haven't got property, and then they're happy when everyone keeps the price of food down. So you're fighting those couple of tides. The other thing is people do want to be involved in farming. They either want to know it because the food they're eating and they understand the story, or genuinely want to be invested in farmland. And I speak to a lot of people, and we're starting to do some work in another stream of business, which is actually helping people that want to be involved in farmland to invest behind us, to sort of get behind some farmland, because they want it. And they know that they can't just go and, it's not that easy just go and buy a farm, right? Whether they've got the capital or not, it's going to be managed, where they buy it, how they farm it, all that sort of thing. And then you've got the big funds on the other end that have got superannuation funds that are investing in farmland. The people investing in those super funds or have their superannuation go into them may or may not know which farmland they've got, their super fund has got a lot of, but those big global super funds, and particularly big national ones, they've got big stakes in. But there's people that actually want to have some participation in farming and farmland and know that they own a bit of farmland. And so that's another thing I'm sort of working on is how do we structure that to make it equitable and economic for them, but also fill that gap of knowing that they've got some farmland that they have some interest in. So I think the myth is that, so there's certainly been a disconnect, but I don't think the disconnect is people don't want to know. They don't want to know, they don't want to be involved. There's
It's just more of a communication challenge.
Right.
Always, farmers want to be understood.
Yeah.
And and consumers want to understand, or just general public want to understand, but somehow the conversation's not really happening as it probably could or should.
No, and also the communication that does come is generally for a purpose. And I've been very involved in media and creating stories and creating demand for products. But if someone's going to put a story out on a certain issue, it's often sensationalised to get the impact that you're trying to get, right? And so that can be positive. But if you're someone that doesn't have an understanding of farming and agriculture, it'll either seem like a whinge or it'll seem like dramatic, and often it's not educating. It's not actually bringing people to understand the issues more. It's more often repelling because it's a very polarising debate. And I was at a dinner party not long ago and people debating live sheep export.
Oh, yeah.
And it was down towards Fremantle, and there was the smell of a ship was coming through because this is the one that had been out in the water and come back in. And obviously that was the ship had been on it for a while, and so this debate was happening. It was quite a it was dynamic and it was emotional debate, and it was interesting that the people that were debating the hardest had the least amount of knowledge, but were most vocal on the point. So I think that goes for a lot of ag industry issues.
Yeah, and I think it's been part of that conversation. I think it was hard. I remember my brother joined the RAC board. RSPCA, wasn't it? RAC, wrong people.
Yeah.
And I said, why did you do that? And he goes, well, they're already talking about us, so one of us has to be in the conversation, right? And it was just, okay, just wanted to go, okay, this is where we stand, because, like you said, if only one person's in the conversation and they have a little bit of understanding, then it's going to be just by through understanding skewed in that direction, isn't it? Yeah. So it's important that we talk to each other more. I think that's one of the messages we get. Mate, when you're not doing it, and I've just learned about you 24/7 supermarket things, so what do you do when you have time off? I mean, you're not involved in food and ag your whole life, are you?
No. I've got a young family, so I love sport, love helping out kids' sport, bit of coaching, bit of Aussie rules, bit of cricket, bit of girls are into water polo, they're into swimming, they're active family, so that is certainly part of it. And the other thing, we have some property and farm, so mostly it's share farms, so I'm sure I go along and act like an expert and get. I think the share farmers would love me to go and shut up.
No, you just turn up and play farm
That's
for a while.
So I was going to say that was it. The kids love it, and we get out there and motorbikes and around the farm and do a bit of I'll say work, but I'm sure that the rest of the guys work on the farm, so it's not work. But get in the sheep yards every now and then, and so I love it, and just actually getting back to the roots of farming and getting it.
So now you've actually been out of active farming for so long, you get in the way of the yards?
Depends who you talk to. I love farming, and I love now understanding the things you do in producing food and fibre, how much you do on the farm really has big impact down there on the quality of the products and the stories you can tell about it. So I think I've got a different appreciation of it than when I was farming before I started moving down the supply chain further. So I think it's amazing. And I was doing soil health stuff 20 odd years ago and looking at soil carbon, looking at things like humic acid, and I used to travel to the back blocks of Western China, bringing humic acid from these humate mines into Australia. And again, this was 20 years ago, before the whole carbon. It was about how we increase the carbon in the soil for productivity, not about sequestration of carbon credits. But I've always been interested in what we're doing in the soil, what we're doing with the health of the soil, and what that means to the health of the farm, but also the health of the food that comes off it. And So yeah, I love getting back to it and teaching the kids that as well.
Well, that's great, mate. So if people want to know more about Fancy Plants and Chia, so we'll just put some links in the show notes, but where do they go? Where are they going?
Yeah, well, fancyplants.com is the website there. That's it's a consumer brand. The Chia Company website, chiaco.com. We've got all the social media as well. It's
Are they still the orange packets in the supermarket?
yeah, orange pack. Look, to be honest, the Chia business, and this has been part of the evolution, is that Chia ultimately got commoditised.
Yeah.
We supply
Which is a great, almost as, I know it's hard on you, but it's almost like the ultimate success. You actually created a commodity almost.
Yeah, no, and we can see that happening. You can see it happening, and that's what pushed us further down the supply chain into chilled. It's, but yeah, we supply supermarkets, but the Chia on the shelf will be in their brand.
Yeah.
And this is again, and we'll see more of it, is part of what supermarkets do. They have brands and they have their own label, and they have their pseudo brands and white label brands, and so you just have to be aware that happens in a supermarket, and part of the evolution. So first of all, they don't want your product. Then when it's successful, if you get it on there, then they'll want it and they want more of it, and then they want it in their brand.
Yeah,
and then ultimately they don't want your brand, because the consumer's aware of it and they don't need a brand. And so that's that evolution that happens. As you say, you either are frustrated with it, or you embrace it, or you see it as a compliment.
Yeah.
That and I say that now, when Chia's now ubiquitous, I can go to any cafe and there's a Chia pudding, or go to the supermarket shop. It's still the number one selling health food product in the two major supermarkets, the Chia food. So it's like.
Do you ever? I've got to ask. Do you ever go into a cafe and see a Chia pudding?
Just
in your head, not to anyone else.
No, what I usually do, because I've got this game about how much they sell for, right?
Oh yeah.
And so I've got photos and photos. I mean, my phone is full of photos, and my kids laugh at me. They go, "When we look through your photos, Dad, they're either farming photos or food photos." And so, or my wife Kay, I'll say, "I'll go down to the supermarket and get whatever," and she's texting me like an hour later, "What are you doing? Get out of the aisle!" Because I'm looking at all these products and pricing, and so competitors' products. But that is, I think. I don't look at it and go, "This is amazing." I look at it and go, "Someone's selling a Chia pudding for $11.50 in the Perth airport, or was it Adelaide airport not long ago, and I think that was $12. Oh, this is a record." And there'll be Starbucks somewhere, and they've got one price.
So you're nerding out on prices of Chia.
Well, the interesting thing is, because I'll go back to Coles and Woolworths and say we need to put the price up 10 cents, and I say they're too expensive. I go, "No, they're 3 times more expensive than that."
Anyway, mate, well, we've talked a lot about the importance of communication up and down the food chain, and I hope this conversation that people are listening to really contributes to that education and communication. You're a man ahead of your time, very talented, and thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.